couple of announcements. One, if you haven't checked it out yet, our podcast is on Spotify, 517 Ministries. It's the Equipping to Equip podcast. It's on pretty much every major platform that I should get it on right now. Spotify, Apple, Google, Amazon, it's there. If you use something that's not on, please tell me and I will try to get it on there. The podcast app is the one I'm trying to get it on next because that's the one I use the most. Make sure to stop by the website, check it out. I'm constantly updating, changing stuff on it. This has our schedule for everything. The Scripture 101 tab has what we're studying on the Friday nights. We've got the media tab has links to our YouTube and our podcast. So it's so much stuff on that. And speaking of the website, don't forget to stop by the shop. We got lots of cool merch. Got some more stuff that I'm going to be loading up in the next couple weeks. Had some more ideas come up that I'm going to be doing. So check it out.
Who are those people?
They're just
models.
They're models. I don't know them. They just get paid to stand there and look pretty with their shirts on. Shavuot coming up. Pentecost is June 4th and 5th. It starts the evening of the 4th, rolls into the 5th. Just wanted to mention it tonight. Mark your calendars. We are going to do something. More details will be coming out. Haven't fully set in stone everything that we're going to be doing. So mark your calendars for June 4th and 5th. Sometime that weekend we'll be doing something. And we missed it this month because of scheduling conflicts, but next month, May the 15th, we're picking back up with our Life of Yeshua series, the parables. So we've already had 2 of these. We've been through some of the parables. We're going to start getting into some more of the deeper parables that have a little bit more of eternal meaning to them. So this one you're not going to want to miss. 6 to 8 right here. And you can RSVP on the website to let us know you're coming. It's going to be fun. I'm excited. Venmo. We just wanted to always make you. Thank you. You did a good job. Thank you for telling me. If you feel like the Lord's putting on your heart to help support what we're doing here, we do have the Venmo QR code on the website on the gift tab. The Venmo QR is there as well. Speaking of Venmo and giving, I really just want to say thank you to everyone who gives to this ministry and this what we're doing, because we have been so blessed to be able to help people. When the Levoses moved to Raleigh, we had more than enough to be able to bless them and send them on their way. Erica's sister's house burned, and we were able to give to them because of your generosity. One thing I do want to say too, while we're talking about giving and Venmo, someone who some of us know, I won't name names, but is going through a little bit of a rough time, and with her dad and some stuff, and we really want to be able to help as a ministry bless that family. So if you feel like that's something you want to help with, give to it, and you can put on there gift and put a little memo, whatever you want, and every bit of that will go towards helping that family as well. So, but it really is amazing. I mean, we have such a small group, but we are able to do so much, and as long as we have enough in the account to pay Elena for watching the kids, I'm like, who needs help? I want to figure, if we can't keep buying coffee, if we can't keep buying cups, but we can bless people and help people, that's what it's more about to me. And like, we were able to do a really big Passover a couple weeks ago because we had the funds, and it's all because of y'all's generosity. So thank you so much for that. And if you're watching this, thank you, because you might not be here today. This is only about half. I was talking to somebody this week, and I was like, we're going to have to bust that wall down and build a bigger living room. When everybody shows up, we'll be in here like sardines. It's going to be awesome. It's going to be awesome. All right, let's jump into the study tonight. Tonight we're doing Torah portion Shemini. Some of these have funny names. It's Leviticus 9 through 11, 9, 10, and 11. And the Hebrew word Shemini actually means eighth. That's where it comes from. Because we're getting ready. The first word of Leviticus 9 is on the 8th day. So that's where this word comes from. But let's talk about a couple of reminders. Before we get into tonight, I always like to, every so often, let's remind us of a few things. One, Yahweh is smarter than we are. Let's make sure we remember that. So when we're reading the scriptures and we come across something that we're like, I don't know about that, God is smarter than we are. He knows better than we do, and He has a plan. Two, the Bible is the infallible word of Yah. It is the infallible word. What it says, it means, and it is the truth. That's where we get grounded in, is our truth. And we have to remember that God does not change. He is the same yesterday, today, and forever. He is throughout eternity, always. Okay? So let's recap kind of where we left off last week so that we can get into this week's portion. Anybody remember what we talked about last week?
Some weird consecration.
Yes.
Some blood on the ears and the thumbs
Yep.
and the feet.
There was all kinds of sacrifices.
Uh-huh.
So, if we back up even a little bit further than that, we saw at the end of Exodus, we saw the completion of the tabernacle. And when they completed it, what happened? What happened?
The presence of the Lord fell.
Yeah, the cloud fell on the tabernacle. It was as soon as they were done. It says Moses completed it, and the next verse talks about the cloud falling. Then we saw in the first part of Leviticus, we saw the instructions of the sacrifices given to the Levites, and we kind of talked last week about how we have a part in our sanctification, in the sanctification process. We play a part in that. Then we saw Aaron and the Levites go through this ordinance of purification so that they could take on the roles of priests. So they had a part that they had a thing they had to go through, a 7-day process that they had to go through before they could take on those roles. And we started off last week by talking about holiness. So where do we say holiness starts? In the heart. And where does holiness end?
In the heart.
In your behavior.
In your behavior, in our actions. We read in Peter where it talked about the holiness, how it should affect our behavior. How are we behaving? It should produce righteous behavior. So let's jump right in.
Okay.
Leviticus chapter 9. And we're gonna bounce around. I'm gonna get some people to read too, so it's not just me standing up here talking the whole time. Although I don't mind doing that. Y'all know me. I don't mind standing up here talking. So Leviticus chapter 9. Now it happened on the 8th day that Moses called Aaron, his sons, and the elders of Israel. So who can tell me why the 8th day is important? Anybody want to take a stab at why the 8th day is important?
You get the rest.
The day after, yeah. So, a few things. Circumcision took place on the 8th day. We see the ritual cleansing of man took place for 7 days. So if you became unclean in the certain ritual practices, then it took 7 days for you to go through a process of cleansing yourself. And then on the 8th day, you would be restored. Right? We look through in the biblical feasts, we see Feast of Tabernacles or Sukkot. We have a 7-day feast, and then there's the 8th great day. So usually in Scripture, we see a connection between 8th day and covenant with God. So what has just happened? We just talked about this. Prior to this verse, in Leviticus chapter 8, the priests were going through this process of consecration, right? So on this day, now we have the 8th day. This is this idea of covenant where now God is turning over the priesthood. Now they have the full responsibility of being priests. They are now the spiritual leaders of Israel. So that's kind of what's going on just in this first verse. So continuing on, then he said to Aaron, take a calf from the herd for a sin offering, and a ram for a burnt offering, both without blemish, and offer them offer them before Adonai. You are to speak to the children of Israel, saying, take a male goat for a sin offering, along with a calf and a lamb, both yearlings without blemish, for a burnt offering, plus a bull and a ram for fellowship offerings to sacrifice before Adonai, along with a grain offering mixed with oil, for today Adonai appears to you. So they brought what Moses commanded before the tent of meeting, and the entire congregation drew near and stood before Adonai. Yes, I see your hand.
What is blemish?
A blemish would be a defect, a spot.
Something that's wrong.
Yeah, so if you were a perfectly white sheep, but you had this one brown spot, could be a blemish. A cut could be a blemish. Yeah, like your mom said, it's something that something's not.
Very.
So we see in these verses right here that their first duty as this new priesthood is to sacrifice for Israel. So that's what they're getting ready to take on. So somebody want to start reading for me in verse 6?
I got you.
All right, just keep reading. We're going to read a lot here for a second.
All right. Moses said, "This is what Adonai commanded that you should do, so that the glory of Adonai may appear to you." Moses said to Aaron, "Draw near to the altar and bring your sin offering and your burnt offering, and make atonement for yourself and for the people. Then present the offering for the people, and make atonement for them, as Adonai commanded." So Aaron drew near to the altar and slaughtered the calf of the sin offering, which was for himself. The sons of Aaron presented the blood to him. Then he dipped his finger in the blood, dabbed it onto the horns of the altar, and poured out the blood at the base of the altar. But the fat, the kidneys, and the cover from the liver of the sin offering he burned up as smoke on the altar, as Adonai had commanded Moses. The flesh and the hide he burned in a fire outside the camp. Aaron slaughtered the burnt offering. Then his sons presented the blood to him, and he splashed it around on the altar. They handed the burnt offering to him piece by piece, along with the head, and he burned them up as smoke on the altar. He washed the innards and the legs, and he offered them in smoke upon the burnt offering on the altar. Then he presented the people's gift, took the goat of the sin offering, which was for the people, slaughtered it, and offered it for sin, just like the first one. He presented the burnt offering and offered it according to the decree. Then Aaron presented the grain offering, filling his hand with some of it and burning it up as smoke on the altar, alongside the burnt offering of the morning. He also slaughtered the bull and the ram as a sacrifice of fellowship offerings for the people. Then his sons brought him the blood, which he splashed around on the altar, as well as the fat from the bull and the ram, the fat tail, and the layer over the innards, along with the kidneys and the covering of the liver. They put the fat upon the breasts, and he burned it on the altar. But the breasts and the right thigh Aaron waved for a wave offering before Adonai, as Moses had commanded. Then Aaron lifted up his hands toward the people and blessed them. Then he stepped down from presenting the sin offering, the burnt offering, and the fellowship offerings. Moses and Aaron then went into the tent of meeting. When they came back out and blessed the people, the glory of Adonai appeared to all the people. Fire came out from the presence of Adonai and devoured the burnt offering and the fat on the altar. When all the people saw it, they shouted and fell on their faces.
So if you weren't here last week, the video from last week is up where we talk a lot about these sacrifices and what the different ones mean. There's a lot of different parts and pieces that are going on here that it's a recap of what we talked about last week. But I do want to mention this, that in verse 6, we see an interesting statement. Because he says, "This is what Adonai commanded that you shall do, so that the glory of Adonai may appear to you." So when we see verses like this, we really need to pay attention to them and look at what's our current application of this command and how is it affecting us. So he says, "This is what Adonai commanded you, that you shall do, so that the glory of Adonai may appear." So if the glory of Yahweh was going to show itself to us, then what role do we have to play in that? So here he's telling them, this is what Adonai tells you to do so that you can see his glory. So in my opinion, we haven't seen the glory of God, signs and wonders, because we haven't done what he requires for his glory to fall. Okay? So, and I got thinking about that, and I thought about how long the church in general has been crying out for God's glory, for God's signs and wonders, for how many times have we ever heard, especially growing up in more of an evangelical church, that the next great awakening, right? We keep hearing all this stuff, and God's given us what we need to do to make that happen. But when I was studying this out and thinking about it, it came to me. I said, we don't need another great awakening. What we need is a great returning to the instructions that He's already given us. Then we'll see His glory return. We don't need this new thing. We don't need this great new thing. We need a great returning. We can't even follow what He's already given us. Why do we need something new? So let's return to what He's already given us. Because here's the thing, and we're going to see this as we go through this portion. Yahweh is not going to allow His glory to be profaned. He's not going to allow it. And we're going to see that as we continue on. This word glory in the Hebrew is the word kavod. And the word kavod means weightiness. It's something that is heavy. And Yah is not going to put something heavy on us. He's not going to put the weight of His glory on us if we're not able to handle it. Because if we're not in a position to handle His glory, then we're going to profane His glory if He gives it to us. So we've got to get ourselves back. We've got to have this great returning to the instructions He's already given us so we can see His glory return. So any questions on chapter 9? So one thing we like to do is at the end of each chapter, we'll stop. And we never want to go too far if somebody has questions going on. Yes?
Now, you can't do animal sacrifices, though, correct?
Correct. We can only do what we can do.
Right. Because
And
we
nothing
don't
more.
have a temple and we don't have
Correct.
Levitical priests.
Correct.
Right.
And as we
We're not
go,
telling everyone to go home and
build an altar in your backyard.
Don't do that.
Start slaughtering now. And you'll see.
Just making sure.
And you're going to see that in a
I've got
minute.
some work tomorrow.
And we talk about this. We talk about this frequently, but we're not supposed to do things our own way. So when God gives instructions, we're not supposed to do them our way just to make them happen. If it's not something we can do, then we're not supposed to do it. And that's where a lot of people get hung up when they start talking about obeying God's commandments. Well, not all commandments are for you. Some of the commandments obviously are for the priests and the Levites. If it's for priests at a tabernacle, please don't go home in your backyard and try to do it. You're going to find out in a minute why you shouldn't do that. That's how we're going to finish this Torah portion now. All right? Any other questions? All right, let's continue on. Let's go on to Leviticus Chapter 6. Does that say 10? It says 10 right there, doesn't it? Okay. I don't know why I said 6. It says 10 right there. And you can't cheat off my notes either. All right, Leviticus Chapter 10. Now Aaron's sons, Nadab and Abihu, each took his own censer, put fire in it, laid incense over it, and offered unauthorized fire before Adonai, which he had not commanded them. Now, real quick before we go any further, they have just seen the fire of God come out of a cloud and burn up what was on this altar that they just sacrificed. At the end of that last one, when they were done and they had everything ready, the fire came out and consumed the sacrifice. Keep that in your mind. So, where did the altar of incense get its coals from?
The altar?
The altar of incense got its coals from the altar of sacrifice. Yes. Right? What does incense represent? We talked about this before.
Your praises, right?
Your praises or your prayer. It can be both sometimes. Right? What does the altar represent? What happens on the altar? Sacrifice. So the altar is a picture type of sacrifice, the sacrifice that we make. Right? So when we're looking at this, we see that there was a prescribed place that the coals came from and a prescribed place for them to be burned at, and they did not get to do it the way they wanted to do it. Right? So verse 2, so fire came out from the presence of Adonai and consumed them. So they died before Adonai. So you'll hear a lot of people read this and they think, well, that doesn't seem fair. They were trying to honor Yah. They were trying to honor God. They were doing, what they thought they should do. Yah has a prescribed method for how to serve, honor, and worship Him, and our zeal and our excitement does not overrule His prescription for holiness.
Come on, baby.
So, which He had not commanded. It was unauthorized. He had not commanded this. It's not that it wasn't fair. It's not that they weren't worshiping Yah. It was that He had not prescribed what they were doing. And there's a lot of different ideas when you study out this story of what happened, why they did what they did, why God was upset with it, what the different words mean. But the biggest reasoning that you find within most scholars over this story is about their excitement and their zeal. That they were like, "Ooh, we're priests! Yeah, we're going to do this thing! Oh, I'm going to get some coals over here!" They were excited, and they allowed their excitement and their zeal to override His prescription for what He wanted to have done.
What about the ones that talk about they offered some translations that say strange fire?
Yes. So the word "strange" there, I can't remember if it's on my notes, so we may talk about this again in a second. The word "strange" there can mean a couple different things. It means strange, alien, unauthorized, and I think we are going to get into that. And we're actually going to get into the Greek equivalents of the word too. I think that comes up in a second. All right, continuing on, verse 3. Then Moses said to Aaron, "This is what Adonai spoke of, saying, 'To those who are near me I will show myself holy. Upon the faces of all the people I will be glorified.' Then Aaron kept silent." Can you imagine your two sons? These two sons would have been the next in line to be high priests after Aaron. And they just get burned up for disobeying God. And you're basically told, "Mm-mm." And Aaron kept silent. He was like, "Woo!" But this is what I was thinking of. Had Yah allowed this to happen, the children of Israel would have gone about doing what seemed right in their own eyes and profaned the glory of Yah. And we see that. Judges 17. Now the man Micah had a shrine of gods, and he made an ephod and household idols, and consecrated one of his sons to become his priest. In those days there was no king in Israel. Every man did what was right in his own eyes. When we studied out Exodus, we studied out the priestly garments. He took his son and made an ephod, made priestly garments, and consecrated him as his own priest. What? That's not what God prescribed. And that's why it says right here, there was no king in Israel. Every man did what was right in his eyes. Let's look at another story that again shows us God has a prescription. Our zeal and excitement does not override that. 2 Samuel chapter 6. David again brought together all the able young men of Israel, 30,000. He and all his men went to Baalah in Judah to bring up from there the ark of God, which is called by the name of the Lord Almighty, who is enthroned between the cherubim on the ark. They set the ark of God on a new cart and brought it from the house of Abinadab, which was on the hill. Uzzah and Ahio, sons of Abinadab, were guiding the new cart with the ark of God on it, and Ahio was walking in front of it. David and all Israel were celebrating with all their might before the Lord, with castanets, harps, lyres, timbrels, sistrums, and cymbals, right? So they were worshiping and celebrating Yah. They were excited. They had the ark. They were bringing it to Jerusalem. But what's the problem? Does anybody see the problem in the story already?
They're doing it their own way.
How?
Cart?
The cart.
Not supposed to be a
They
cart.
set the Ark of God on a new cart. When we studied Exodus, how was the Ark supposed to be carried?
Rods.
On rods
With
by priests.
Yes,
Yeah.
they had the poles that went through, the poles of acacia wood that went through the rings of gold, so it was carried, but it was not only just carried, it was to be carried by the priests. Verse 6, when they came to the threshing floor of Nacon, Uzzah reached out and took hold of the ark because the oxen stumbled. The Lord's anger burned against Uzzah because his irreverent act. Therefore God struck him down and he died there beside the ark. We just talked about this. How was the ark supposed to be transported?
On the poles.
On the poles. So who was in violation of that decree? By putting it on a cart, who was violating the decree?
Whoever instructed them.
David was one, and then the Levites too. The priests, they would have known. David says, do this. You'd be like,
Wait a minute.
God said, they would have known that.
Yeah.
So they're in violation as well. So was Uzzah technically doing a good thing by catching the ark from falling off this cart?
He was trying to.
Yeah. He was.
He had no, what is it?
Ill will.
Yeah, correct. He saw this holy thing of God about to fall off a cart. His instinct was, I got to stop this thing from falling because it's going to be a dishonor for it to fall off the cart. Not understanding that it was a dishonor for it to be on the cart anyways.
Would it kind of been cool if we could have known what would happen if he didn't try to catch it? Like, would it have caught itself? I mean, it's...
It would have been like Indiana Jones, the ark opened up, everybody just died.
Yeah,
Everybody melted right there.
Everybody just melts, they vaporize right there. So,
End of story.
so why did Yahweh get angry with Uzzah?
Because he touched the ark.
Yes.
He was disobedient.
Yes.
Well, so you think he was so, it wasn't
You have deal
so
without
angry
wisdom.
with him, but with the entire situation.
He's absolutely angry with the entire
Yeah.
situation, but the entire situation didn't get killed.
Yeah.
He got killed for touching it, right? But see, here's the thing. The ark was a holy object
Right.
devoted to Yah. It was his possession, right? We just said earlier, Yah will not allow his holiness, his holy things, to be profaned, right? So, if you have a rotten apple, and you take your rotten apple and you put it in a jar full of good apples, will the rotten apple become any less rotten?
No.
No. What's going to happen?
It's going to rot.
It's going to rot all the other things, right? So, with Yah not allowing his holy things to be profaned, if you touch it, he's not going to allow your unrighteousness to profane his righteousness. So, his system works opposite. Whatever touches the holy things becomes holy. We talked about that in Exodus. That's why they weren't allowed to touch the things. That's why there were certain things that had to be used in certain ways. Because whatever touched the holy thing became holy. Now, what did we just talk about earlier about the weight of glory? He's not going to put the weight of his glory on you if you're not in a position to handle the weight of his glory. Same thing with his holiness. If you are not in a place to where you can become holy, his holiness is going to have the exact opposite, and it was going to destroy the vessel that is unholy. And it reminded me of the story of when Jesus told the parable of don't put old or new wine in old wineskins. Same thing. That old wineskin cannot handle the weight of that new wine that's going to be coming into it. So if you keep reading this story, you'll see that David actually, because of this, became fearful of God. And he was like, I'm not taking that into the city. Like, he refused to take the ark into the city. And he wound up leaving it at the house of Obed for 3 months. And it wound up blessing and prospering Obed because it was there in his house. So David winds up going back. He gets word that this is happening. He goes back and gets it. He makes sacrifices for it. He dances and praises. They're doing the same thing they were doing there. Dancing and having a great time. He's like, all right, I'm bringing it back to Jerusalem. He's doing the same thing. What's interesting is when he comes back into the city, it says that he's wearing a linen robe. So he's like, all right, let me get myself right. Saul's daughter Michal sees it and gets mad at David for dancing and having a good time because he's bringing it in there. David winds up giving out bread to all the people. It's a really neat story. And then we see God establishing his covenant with David. And he gives him the promise of Solomon getting to build the temple. So it's interesting. When he gets the stuff in order, that the favor of Yah returns. So back when he was getting it out of order, on a cart, got a man killed for it. And he's like, all right, let me get this back in order. And we see the favor of Yah return. So let's look at one more story that's going to illustrate this idea of the holy being profaned. Acts chapter 5. I'm sure we're all somewhat familiar with this story. Now a man named Ananias, together with his wife Sapphira, also sold a piece of property. With his wife's full knowledge, he kept back part of the money for himself, but brought the rest and put it at the apostles' feet. Then Peter said, Ananias, how is it that Satan has so filled your heart that you have lied to the Holy Spirit and have kept for yourself some of the money received for the land? Didn't it belong to you before it was sold, and after it was sold, wasn't the money at your disposal? What made you think of doing such a thing? You have not lied just to human beings, but to God. When Ananias heard this, he fell down and died, and great fear seized all who heard what had happened. Then some young men came forward, wrapped up his body, and carried him out and buried him. About 3 hours later, his wife came in, not knowing what had happened. Peter asked her, tell me, is this the price you and Ananias got for the land? Yes, she said, that is the price. Peter said to her, how could you conspire to test the Spirit of the Lord? Listen, the feet of the men who buried your husband are at the door, and they will carry you out also. At that moment she fell down at his feet and died. Then the young men came in, and finding her dead, carried her out and buried her beside her husband. Great fear seized the whole church and all who heard about these events. So, what was the problem with what happened with Ananias and Sapphira?
I am confusion.
Most people look at this and they say, well, they lied.
They set apart something.
Yes. So, with most people think it's that they lied. That they sold something and they lied about it. The issue is not that they lied. The issue is that once they said in their heart that they were going to devote that land, the money that they got from the sale of that land, to Yah, it became Yah's property. And then they tried to keep some of it. Now, what did we just learn from the story of Uzzah and the ark? What's God, you're not allowed to touch. So they took what was God's property and held some of it back. Well, when it became God's property, guess what happened to it?
Set apart.
It became holy. It was set apart. So, Yah does not mess around with holiness. And as I was thinking about this, too, and this isn't in my notes, I was thinking about where we are at as individuals with God. You know, there's so many times where I think, you know, man, God, what, you know, why don't we see this? Why don't we see that? What, you know, why am I not further? Why can't I do this? Why can't I do that? And it just dawned on me this week studying this out. Like, God cares about you enough not to give you His glory because He knows it will destroy you.
Right.
He's going to let you work this thing out and get set apart to Him before He allows any of this to come to you. So that's why I was saying earlier, I really believe that once we have this reawakening to His instructions and what we're supposed to be doing, we're going to see more of His glory actually being revealed in this earth. So continuing on, can I have another reader, please? Can somebody read for me?
What verse?
Verse 4. Start in verse 4.
I will read. Just back up. Then Moses called Mishael and Elzaphan, the sons of Aaron's uncle Uzziel, and said to them, come near and carry your relatives away from the front of the sanctuary to outside of the camp. So they drew near and carried them, still in their tunics, outside of the camp, as Moses had said.
Okay, so what was left of them?
Their
Their
tunics.
clothing.
Their tunics.
Clothing.
Right? Who were these people that just died?
Aaron's sons.
Aaron's son, which makes them
Priests.
Priests. And what was left of them again?
Tunic.
So what would that tunic have been?
Clogs.
Set apart.
Their priestly garments. Right? That was, and what were those priestly garments made out of?
Linen.
Yeah, linen. What does linen represent?
Holiness.
Purity.
Okay,
Holiness.
okay.
Righteousness. Set apart.
Let's go to Revelation for a second. Revelation 19. Let us rejoice and be glad and give the glory to him, for the wedding of the Lamb has come, and his bride has made herself ready. She was given fine linen to wear, bright and clean, for the fine linen is the righteous deeds of the people, of the saints. That word kedashim is the Hebrew for saints. So even though their flesh was burned, their righteous deeds, their garments remained.
Wow. Never noticed that.
Matthew 5:16, in the same way let your light so shine before men that they may see your good works, your righteous deeds, and glorify your Father in heaven. 1 Corinthians, now if anyone builds on the foundation with gold, silver, precious stones, wood, hay, straw, each one's work, deeds, will become clear, for the day will show it, because it is to be revealed by fire. That's what just happened. They were revealed by fire. They went through the fire. If anyone's works, their deeds built on the foundation survives, he will receive a reward. So let's jump back to Leviticus. Let's continue on to the portion. Will you read 6 through 10, babe?
Did I talk about them being carried out?
Verse 6 is where we...
Okay, I don't remember reading that.
Yeah, verse 6.
Then Moses said to Aaron and to Eleazar and to Ithamar, his sons, do not uncover your heads or tear your clothes, so that you may not die, and he will not be angry with the entire congregation. But let your kinsmen, the whole house of Israel, mourn over the burning that Adonai has kindled. You must not go out from the entrance of the tent of meeting, or you will die, for the anointing oil of Adonai is on you. So they acted according to the word of Moses. And Adonai spoke to Aaron, saying, do not drink wine or fermented drink, whether you nor your sons with you, when you go into the tent of meeting, so that you do not die. This is to be a statute forever throughout your generations. You are to make a distinction between the holy and the common, and between the unclean and the clean.
So, verse 10, well, obviously we've talked about this many times when we studied through Exodus, that there is a distinction that has to be made. There must be a distinction. If you look like the world, there's no distinction. If you act like the world, there's no distinction. If you're doing the things the world is doing, there's no distinction. So where is your distinction? And the other thing is, he brings up here that they're not to drink any wine or fermented drink before they go into service. Now, like, that just seems like a pretty self-explanatory, common sense kind of thing, you know. That, you know, let's say, you know, I'm not going to throw back a few beers before I come in here and teach y'all. You know, you're just not of sober mind. Even one glass of wine, it loosens your senses a little bit. So he's like, hey, look, don't do this, because if you do that and you come into my presence and you make a mistake, I can't let you profane my holiness. Even if it's a mistake, because you drink a glass of wine, that's profaning my holiness. So he's making some more distinctions with them right here. And I didn't have this in my notes, but when we read this, I just saw this. And he tells them this stuff, and it says, so they acted according to the word of Moses. Some places it says they acted according to the word of Yah. Here they acted... So when they're getting this information, the words of Moses hold the same weight as if it came from the mouth of Yah, because they said, we don't want to hear you. Back in Exodus, they were like, no, we don't want to hear him. He scares us. We don't want to hear him. We want to talk to Moses. So Moses is very much a picture type of God here for them. And then if we think about it, Aaron, who is Aaron?
High priest.
The high priest, right? So if Moses is the representation of God, Aaron is the high priest. Who's our high priest? Yeshua, Jesus is our high priest. So this neat little thread is kind of woven into this story, which is pretty cool. All right, who wants to read 11 through 20?
I can read.
Do it.
And you must teach the Israelites all the decrees that the Lord has given them through Moses. Then Moses said to Aaron and his remaining sons, Eleazar and Ithamar, take what is left of the grain offering after a portion has been presented as a special gift to the Lord, and eat it beside the altar. Make sure it contains no yeast, for it is most holy. You must eat it in a secret place, for it has been given to you and your descendants as the portion of the special gifts presented to the Lord. These are the commands I have been given, but the breast and thigh that were lifted up as special offering may be eaten in any place that is ceremonially clean. These parts have been given to you and your descendants as you portion the space offerings presented by the people of Israel. You must lift up the thigh and breast as a special offering to the Lord, along with the fat of the special gifts. These parts will belong to you and your descendants as your permanent right, just as the Lord has commanded. Moses then asked them what had happened to the goat of the sin offering. When he discovered it had been burned up, he became very angry with Eleazar and Ithamar, Aaron's remaining sons. Why didn't you eat the sin offering in the sacred area? He demanded. It is a holy offering. The Lord has given it to you to remove the guilt of the community and to purify the people, making them right with the Lord. Since the animal's blood was not brought into the holy place, you should have eaten the meat in the sacred area as I ordered you. Then Aaron answered Moses, today my sons presented both their sin offering and burnt their offering to the Lord. And yet this tragedy has happened to me. If I had eaten the people's sin offering on such a tragic day as this, would the Lord have been pleased? And when Moses heard this, he was satisfied.
Any questions on chapter 10?
So I don't understand the end there.
So basically, Aaron was kind of arguing with Moses because he was like, really? Dude, I just lost my sons, and now you're worried about whether or not I ate something? And Moses is like, I don't care about your sons. This is what God told us to do. So it was
Aaron basically pleaded I was mourning.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so it's
One more time.
I got it right here.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I was like, I looked.
Here, we'll just take, I don't know where the big ones are, but we can have these. All right, moving on to 11. Leviticus 11. Man, we're making like killer time tonight. These shorter portions, that's what.
Russian.
There's only 3 chapters tonight. All right, let's go. Leviticus 11:1. Adonai spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying to them, speak to the children of Israel, saying, these are the living things which you may eat among all the animals that are on the earth. So, for context, what we're getting ready to talk about, God is getting ready to tell them what is food and what is not food. He is not telling them what food they can and cannot eat. He's telling them what is supposed to be food and what is not supposed to be food. Whatever has a split, divided hoof, and chews cud among the animals, that you may eat. Nevertheless, you should not eat those that only chew cud or have a split hoof. The camel, though it chews the cud, does not have a divided hoof, is unclean to you. The coney, though it chews the cud, yet does not have a divided hoof, so it is unclean to you. The hare, though it chews the cud, does not split the hoof, so it is unclean to you. The pig, though it has a split, divided hoof, does not chew the cud, so it is unclean to you. You are not to eat meat from them, nor are you to touch their carcasses, they are unclean to you. From all that are in the waters, you may eat whatever has fins and scales within the waters, in the seas and in the rivers. Those you may eat. But any that do not have fins and scales in the sea or in the rivers, among those that swarm on the waters, or among any of the living creatures that are in the waters, they are loathsome to you. These are to be detestable to you. You shall not eat meat from them, and you should detest their carcasses. Whatever has neither fins nor scales in the waters, that is a detestable thing. And what's interesting about this list is that you start to see, back then they didn't have the information that we have, but you start to see a thread that science will back up this list as good and not good things to eat. So camels don't have sweat glands. They can't perspire. And there's a lot of toxins that get released in your sweat. we're getting ready to look at some of the birds that are scavengers, like
Vulture.
turkey vultures. Turkey vultures don't have an excrement system. Why would you eat that? Yes.
What does loathsome mean?
Bad. These are loathsome to you.
Really gross.
Really gross,
Ugh.
disgusting. You shouldn't do. Oh, stay away from them.
Don't eat this frog.
All right, somebody want to read 13 through 21?
Gotcha.
All right, Darren.
Among the birds you should detest the following. They are not to be eaten. They are loathsome. The eagle, the vulture, the black vulture, the red kite, and any kind of black kite, any kind of raven, the horned owl, the screech owl, the gull, and any kind of hawk. The little owl, the cormorant, the great owl, the white owl, the desert owl, the osprey, the stork, any kind of heron, the hoopoe, and the bat. All flying insects that walk on all fours are detestable to you. Yet you may eat from all winged creeping things that go on all fours, which have legs above their feet, with which to hop on the earth. You may eat from any kind of locust, any kind of katydid, any kind of cricket, and any kind of grasshopper. But all winged, creeping things that have 4 feet are loathsome to you. Moreover, by these also you will become unclean. Whoever touches their carcasses should be unclean until the evening. Whoever carries any part of their carcass is to wash his clothes, and will be unclean until the evening. Every animal with a separating hoof, but not split, or does not chew cud, is unclean to you. Everyone who touches them will become unclean. So whatever moves on its paws, among all animals that go on all fours, is unclean to you. Whoever touches their carcasses will be unclean until the evening. Whoever carries their carcass is to wash his clothes and will be unclean until the evening. They are unclean to you.
So let's look at this idea of clean, unclean, because the thing we have to remember, some of the terms that we see here get a little like, what does this mean? Like, unclean. That's like super bad. No, it's not super bad. It's just, it is what it is. It's a ceremonial term. So if you were unclean, you were not allowed to go to the tabernacle to present your sacrifice, right? So the Hebrew word for unclean is tameh, and yes, it means unclean. It is a ceremonial term, and like we said, they could not enter the tabernacle if they were unclean. So what does it say they got to do? They got to take a bath. They got to wait until evening, right? So if you were to go out and you're walking on the road and there's a dead deer on the side of the road and you grab it and you move it, what's the chances that you probably picked up some bacteria? Especially if that deer been sitting there a while. Good chance. They don't have the same hygiene system. They don't have the same medical system. They don't have antibacterial soap. So for them to pick up potential virus or germs from a dead animal would have been very, very bad. So what do? Oh, they go take a bath and make sure they get all that mess off of them, and then they wait until evening. And so really, this was like ancient quarantine practices. Take a bath, stay in your house, wait till evening. Once evening's come, all right, you've waited it out. It's that time. You're not sick, right? What was interesting though is to study this out. The Greek equivalent for this word unclean is babyloo. I know it looks like baby loo, but it's babyloo. And if you're a Greek scholar, I apologize for just butchering that word. But it means to profane or desecrate. And the root of this word means unauthorized. What did we just see? Nadab and Abihu, what did they offer? Unauthorized fire, right? Unauthorized. They were unclean. That was an unclean fire that they brought in. So we're seeing this connection with what they did and the food and the animals that God says to eat and not to eat. So continuing on. Among the creeping things that creep on the earth, the following are unclean to you. The weasel, the rat, any kind of great lizard. The gecko, the monitor lizard, the wall lizard, the skink, and the chameleon. Among all that creep, these are the ones that are unclean to you. Whoever touches them when they are dead will be unclean until the evening. Whatever falls on them when they are dead will become unclean. Whether it is a vessel of wood or clothing or skin or sackcloth, whatever vessel it is with which any work is to be done, it must be put into water, and it will be unclean until the evening, and then it will be clean. Now, if any of them falls into a clay pot, everything that is in it will become unclean, and you are to break it. Any food that may be eaten but has water on it from such a pot will become unclean. Also, any drink that may be drunk in any such a pot will become unclean. So what's the big deal about a clay pot?
It's porous.
It's porous. Exactly, it's porous. What happens when something porous sits in water? It absorbs. You can ask my wife. I yell at her all the time for leaving wooden spoons in a sink full of water.
Thanks, honey.
All my
Surf safe.
surf safe training comes back. I'm like, you can't put the wood in the water. What?
I failed my test.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'll help you study next time. It's but that's the thing. That clay pot, if a lizard was crawling over and died and fell into a clay pot that had water, and you didn't realize it, that lizard's going to sit in the water. All that bacteria is coming out into the water, and then what's going to happen to that clay pot? That clay pot's yeah, you have to break it. You know,
So they didn't have glaze, I imagine.
they weren't glazed. They were very, very porous. They didn't have dishwashers with high temperature heat that could blast it. You know, they didn't have that stuff. So it would have been useless. They would have had to destroy it because there would have been no safety. And again, we're looking at this, and we've talked about this before, but so many of the commandments in the Torah are practical. It's like God is like, hey, don't use that pot anymore. You're going to get sick.
Yeah, right.
And so many people look at this and be like, that's Old Testament. I don't have to worry about that. It's a legitimate, purposeful, common sense thinking right there. That's what he's doing.
You can take that as a principle.
God is practical right there.
I mean, it really is. It reminds me again of we've talked about this before. That commandments can also be specific for that command and applied as a principle. Like if I were to take a wooden cutting board and cut raw meat
Chicken
on it, and then leave it for 4 days, and then go and make something again, the chances of giving my whole family salmonella have greatly increased. So it's just go wash.
The practicality of a lot of this stuff is really amazing. Everything on which part of their carcass falls will become unclean. An oven or stove for pots is to be broken into pieces. They are unclean and will be unclean to you. Nevertheless, a spring or cistern for collecting water will be clean, though anyone who touches their carcass will become unclean. Why would a spring or a cistern for collecting water be clean, but not a pot of water?
It's
Running water.
Running water. Yeah, it's moving. It's living water. It's bubbling. It's moving. Same reason bacteria doesn't grow in a moving stream, but if you get a spot where the water backs up and it's not moving, stagnant water, it'll start growing all kinds of stuff. If part of a carcass falls on any seed for sowing that has not yet been sown, it is clean. But if water is put on the seed and part of the carcass falls on it, it is unclean. All right, again, practicality. Why would this be a thing? Why would this be a thing?
any part of the carcass.
If a carcass falls on any seed that has not yet been sown versus a seed that's had water put on it.
It'll carry things, and when it grows, it'll.
Yeah. So once the water hits the seed, the outer shell of that seed that's protecting that seed starts to open.
Right.
Right. If it's not open yet, it's got a nice protective layer on it.
Right.
Think about a sunflower seed. Then nothing's getting through that hard shell of a sunflower seed. But as soon as you plant it in the ground and water hits it, that thing's going to start opening up. So again, the practicality of what God's telling them. If any animal that you may eat dies, the one who touches its carcass will become unclean until the evening. He who eats of its carcass is to wash his clothes and be unclean until the evening. Also, the one who carries its carcass is to wash his clothes and be unclean until the evening. Every creeping thing that crawls on the earth is detestable. It should not be eaten. Whatever moves on its belly or crawls on all fours or has many feet among all the creeping things that crawl on the earth, these you are not to eat, for they are detestable. You are not to contaminate yourselves with any creeping thing that crawls, nor make yourselves unclean with them or defiled by them. For I am Adonai your God. Therefore sanctify yourselves and be holy, for I am holy. You are not to defile yourselves with any kind of creeping thing that moves on the earth. For I am Adonai, who brought you up out of the land of Egypt to be your God. Therefore you shall be holy, for I am holy. This is the Torah, the instructions of the animal, the bird, every living creature that moves in the waters, and every creature that creeps on the earth, to make a distinction between the unclean and the clean, and between the living thing that may be eaten and the living thing that may not be eaten. Any questions on chapter 11?
What winged insect has 4 feet?
That's what I was thinking the same thing.
Yeah.
Huh.
I don't know. Most insects don't have 4 feet.
I think so.
Yeah. Yeah. But there's also a distinction with those two, that they have feet and can jump. So there's a lot of different. They have to have feet and legs.
And aren't numbers weird? Sometimes.
Yeah. Sometimes numbers in translation get messed up. Sometimes 4 actually means 40. Sometimes 400 means 4. You know, there's a lot. It gets really tricky with the translation with the numbers. So yes, there's a possibility there. The biggest thing is, like when it talks about feet, it has feet below the legs and can jump. So
Yeah, and it has a joint.
so yeah, so
You can see a
locusts,
grasshopper.
grasshoppers, crickets,
Yeah.
those are technically clean. But like you're not supposed to eat like caterpillars and
It'll be
worms and centipedes.
Praying mantises
You
have
got
4 legs.
eating
Oh, praying mantises have 4 legs.
Yeah, because the top 2
There's
are
your
arms.
hands. Yeah.
Yep.
Oh, weird.
Yep.
I mean, it makes sense if you see John the Baptist. He was in the wilderness.
He ate locusts.
So
Yep,
he
honey
was-
and locusts.
He was eating what was,
So he was eating what was clean. Yeah, he was allowed to eat
what
that.
was considered food.
That's right.
Mm.
So that is
Shemini.
the portion for tonight. That's
super
you see what time it is?
It's not even 8.
I didn't even get to 8 o'clock. We got to do another one. Let's go. Let's find something else. Let's keep going.